to the cloud. Okay, welcome aboard, everyone. Rahul, Lena, Lewis, Peter, and Dan as well. So let's talk about why you may want to become a blockchain architect or developer. Now, before we get started, quick introduction. This is actually going to be a short, I wouldn't say course per se, but short sort of presentation to give you some insight into what you need to do to become a blockchain developer, a blockchain architect. Now, I've been in IT for 25 years, and just a quick introduction here. Excuse me. As far as my experience, I'm a certified blockchain solutions architect with the Blockchain Training Alliance. I also have their Hyperledger certification as well. I also hold the Core Developer cert as well. And I've also been known, actually, if you look at YouTube and a lot of other sites like O'Reilly, I've been known for actually my deployments of Hyperledger Fabric on blockchains as a service, such as IBM and AWS. And that's sort of where I specialized in around blockchain architecture and development as well. So with that said, I'm also a book author. So the book is Architecting Enterprise Blockchain Solutions with Wiley. I'm also a former US Navy veteran as well. Now, one thing I can say, and it looks like we have Andrew waiting to get in. One thing that I can say is that even though we do have a crypto blockchain sort of winter as it's called, in other words, there's a lot of instability in the market, a lot of what would be called fraud or basically, regulatory issues like with Celsius, for example, just a lot of things going on. It's still a good time, especially if you're going to be an enterprise architect. For example, enterprise being that you want to develop distributed applications, chain code for large companies. So there's definitely a lot going on in the market. And welcome, Rahul from New York. And there's just so many things. And to be honest, some of the jobs I've been seeing lately, I'm going to go through LinkedIn and talk about a few things as well. Some of the jobs have literally sort of made me think, well, maybe I might want to, take on a new role because this sounds like fun, right? So there's just so much out there right now. And I'll talk about the salary ranges and all that. Is anyone here in IT now? Anyone working in any form of IT, like development, infrastructure, cloud, anything like that? And Dan, sure, great. All right. And you should be able to unmute yourselves if you want to speak up, ask questions, feel free. I don't believe. Let me go ahead and unmute. I didn't realize I'm blocking people or the system is. Okay. Okay, Peter does Java. Okay, so Peter Root, that is going to have a head start in this area because a lot of blockchain platforms, and I'll talk about some of the ones, they already use Java in a lot of respects. And to be fair and honest, whether it's Java, JavaScript, a lot of the front-end applications can easily be ported over to different blockchains. So there's definitely a lot of great opportunities there. So Peter has a head start. Lena is in Linux. Welcome aboard, Lena. That name sounds familiar as well from yesterday. Great. As far as being focused in IT right now, you have a head start. I was just talking to a company about 2 weeks ago. They were looking for someone that had more or less infrastructure experience to where they could deploy a blockchain in-house instead of in the cloud. And they didn't want to, of course, or couldn't actually use like a public blockchain like Polygon or Ethereum. And I'll talk about Ethereum too. So it's sort of an interesting time right now in Ethereum because we not only have the big basically merge coming up here on September 15th, where we're going to, and we're already seeing a lot of the miners start taking their mining rigs offline from the proof of work configs and consider moving over to, for example, Ethereum Classic, so that they can continue making some kind of return on their expensive mining rigs. So that's another discussion for another day. I may hold a meetup on that because there's a lot going on there. So if that's of interest, definitely, let me know. Okay, comment. Really, that's surprising. Yeah, so if you know Java, you should not have. Now, I think it too. Here's the thing. A lot of it comes down to selling yourself. I always tell people that sometimes if you don't present yourself, and I'm not saying this is not the case for Peter or not, I don't know, but one of the things that that can come up is a lot of these companies, they do want sort of experience. And unfortunately, this is the challenge that I think that we're going to run into. And I'm certainly not here to say that becoming a blockchain engineer, architect, or developer is going to be easy, because if I was saying that, that would be misleading. But if you have IT experience, you have a head start. There's no question about it. For example, like in my case, when I work with clients, generally they like the fact that I have experience with AWS. They like the fact that I have experience, working with Ethereum or Hyperledger. So that sort of helps me because I got most of my experience just by documenting stuff on GitHub or just training and all that. So that sort of just helped me get into the space. Now, yeah, so if Rahul, you have AWS experience, perfect. Yeah, so definitely sounds like some of you definitely can do pretty well in the area. But, sometimes, again, it's always that first step that's the hardest, right? Trying to break through the barrier. And again, don't forget, we're in a downturn. There's no question about it. I think, too, a lot of companies, they throw out the job roles because they sort of feel they need to look for someone, even though they may not have the requisition available. And there's certain companies that have a tendency to do that as well, I have found. But in general, like a developer, though, really, it's funny because, and I'm going to dig up his name and I'll post that as well, like the blockchain headhunter group. They're always posting about developers. So like with Solidity, if you can learn Solidity, and Java is certainly a good stepping stone to that, because Solidity is really a combination of JavaScript and C++ or C#. So it's, again, there's a good jump board, I think. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. I have a meeting at 10. I'm going to have to jump on after this, so I want to make sure we get to cover everything. So what exactly is so what I'm going to do, just to be clear, I'm going to talk about some specifics for a blockchain architect and for a developer. because again, some of you may be interested in becoming more of an architect. Some of you may want to become a developer. So you'll see the presentation will cover both, and we'll sort of wrap up with the same focus. So basically a blockchain architect is really a data specialist, someone that can put in place requirements and design a blockchain and help implement this blockchain. They're highly paid professionals. And also too, these roles have a tendency to be pre-sales or enterprise focused. So what does that mean? If you want to go work for a company like Accenture or Deloitte, they're more consulting. But if you want to go work for a company like Walmart, let's say, they hire blockchain people like crazy. Google has been hiring blockchain teams as well. I've been personally contacted by a few of the recruiters about 3 months ago, 4 months ago. And a lot of companies are looking for developers, there's no question. But I think too, when we talk about enterprise, companies like GE, General Electric are looking, and not to mention the vendors like AWS, Google, I think I just mentioned. So if you're like an enterprise architect, this could be a natural, progression as well, I think. Now also too, pre-sales could be like working for companies such as Worldwide Technology, or companies that may not directly sell blockchain services, but have customers that are data focused, and having to talk about blockchain is really important in some of those discussions. So what about a developer? What is a blockchain developer? And there isn't really a right or wrong answer here, because if you look at like 30 different jobs, you're going to find that everyone is different. It's just an a la carte of, every company's requirements. But in general, a developer is going to develop decentralized applications and smart contracts based on blockchain technology. Now, I would also probably add, if you're going to get into Hyperledger, that's really more centralized or semi-centralized, like consortium based. So it's private versus public. So that's going to be like chain code. But in general, let's just give you some examples. So for those folks that want to get into Solidity, that's really a combination of JavaScript and C++. And it has some similarities to Python in some respects. But so it's really, again, and if you read the history of Solidity, it was developed specifically for Ethereum. Now, Ripple is based off of C++. Corda, R3 Corda, which is an enterprise blockchain financial sector, is based off of Rust. Hyperledger Fabric is mainly Golang. However, client applications are developed in Java, JavaScript. Also, too, they do have APIs for Python as well. So it depends on if you want to be more front end or back end or middleware as well. This is one of the things to consider. As far as how to become a developer, what are some of the roles for like an architect? One thing too that you're going to see, and I ran into this just this morning, to look at a few roles that we're going to talk about here in a minute, is a lot of the roles will say they want a blockchain architect, but in reality, they want a developer. So if you're a developer, you want to put together code, maintain blockchain networks, this is the role for you. Now, some other roles you'll see will say blockchain engineer, blockchain architect. They're going to be actually pre-sales, where you'll need to whiteboard solutions. You'll need to design, high-level architectures. You may need to do a lot of proof of concepts. That's, the area that you'll run into quite a bit. Now, as far as, for example, some of the IT roles that might be a good sort of what I would call not really lateral move, like, going from here to there. It's more of like a lateral, vertical, horizontal at the same time, I guess. Could be that you're already a solutions engineer, a systems engineer, an enterprise architect, pre-sales engineer, a DBA. To be honest, if you have a SQL skills or, whether it's relational, actually doesn't matter if it's SQL per se, but if you have just database skills, whether it's relational or not, this is a good fit. Because a lot of the blockchains have transaction logs, for example, like Hyperledger. And if you're already a developer, I think, again, that's a benefit. Now, as far as the common requirements, I'm going to be honest, this is like a moving target. I have seen companies like Consensus have very similar requirements to companies that, let me let Jason in here, have very similar requirements to companies that would be sort of like more in the consulting space. So they want you to have a master's degree or something, right? And the reality is, that master's degree, there isn't really a degree in blockchain, at least, from a credible institution. There's certificates out there. And one thing I forgot to mention, I actually do teach the initial blockchain courses for Caltech, mainly for Simplilearn through Simplilearn. So there's a 6-month program I teach, the first course in a series there. So one thing that I do see is there's certainly a lot of certificate programs, but you don't go out to go to Cornell University or MIT and get a degree in blockchain. That just is not expected. Now, IT, that's a different story, right? One thing too that I do find is the smaller company, generally the easier requirements they have. Now, when I say smaller company, I want to distinguish startups. There's a lot of roles still that are advertising for developers, mainly for blockchain startups. This could be crypto focused. So you're going to need to know ICOs. That's going to be initial coin offerings. And then you're going to focus mainly typically on Ethereum or a Polygon. Generally too could be Solana. That's generally the big three that you see. And then all the other altcoins, typically aren't really a requirement or even on the radar, to be honest. Now, as far as some of the requirements, if you want to be like an architect, you're going to need to have whiteboard skills. You need to look at adoption strategies, architectures as well. So why would you want to become an architect or developer? Again, for those that just joined, I'm going to just sort of talk about both an architect and a developer as far as career opportunities, salaries, and stuff like that. So there's a lot of good reasons. The reality is that there's still demand. LinkedIn, for example, about 2 years ago, I think it was 2020 or 21, had announced that blockchain was actually the #1 hard skill at the time that companies were looking for. Now, whether you are going to be a full-time blockchain developer or architect or not, learning about blockchain is still going to probably help your career in a lot of situations. And then as far as, I need to update that slide. Okay, so what are the tasks? So as far as some of the tasks, again, it's, again, I think I mentioned this, right? It's going to vary by company quite a bit. A lot of organizations, what I typically see, a question here. Okay, so looks like Peter had a link for The developer bootcamp with consensus. Okay, thanks for sharing, Peter. I don't know much about the consensus bootcamp. I'm going to be fair and honest. I've looked at it, and certainly consensus is a great name in conferences. Here's a dirty little secret that I didn't tell you. Well, you get the point. So here's the thing that people don't realize about the training industry. And colleges, for example, and a lot of these large organizations such as Consensus, or even Caltech, MIT, GWU is another one, Florida, no, what is that? University of Florida. So all of these organizations have some type of blockchain training, right? Or certificate programs. The reality is that most of these organizations do not actually do any teaching or have developed any content. They typically go out to a contractor like me, or a company like Simply Learn, or companies like Quickstart, to have it put together. And all they do is they collect a fee, basically, to put, Caltech or MIT on their certificate. So basically, 25 to 30% of what you pay for that program goes directly to the university, and all they did was basically stamp, their logo on the certificate. They don't even mail out the certificates generally. It's usually the third-party training company. So a lot of people don't realize that. So I don't have an answer for that one, Peter, but thanks for sharing that. I will take a look at it. I have seen it, to be honest. I've come to the point, being on the back end of the training world, it's sort of like, yeah, it could be good, but it's probably the same company that developed this other program too, if you get my point. People, again, don't realize that when you pay $6,000 to this university for taking even a cloud boot camp, a blockchain boot camp, doesn't really matter, even a programming camp as well. A lot of these, again, are not taught by any of the university faculty. They're just taught by someone, being paid by the hour. And, that's really just how it is. Okay. So just be aware, again, your mileage may vary with these programs. And again, I'm just being honest about it. I'm not trying to sell anyone programs. That's not my goal. I'm just sort of saying, hey, here's the deal. Be realistic about it. So if you're going to become an architect, a lot of it comes down to how well you can sell yourself and how well can you design solutions. And some of the other tasks here could be everything from working with different companies to identifying stakeholders, migration, stuff like that. Now, as far as a developer, this is going to be somewhat different, right? The task for a developer versus like a true architect is going to be very, very different. So the developer is more back end. They're going to be not the ones selling the solutions. They're not going to be the ones really doing a lot of the designing in a lot of respects. They're going to be the ones making it work, right? The developers are really the heroes here, because the pre-sales architects, the solutions architects really can't sell anything if there isn't a product to sell, right? So the developers, they're the ones that have to make this all work. So it'll come down to putting together smart contracts, DApps, maintaining networks. Typically, you're going to maintain everything from APIs over to your GitHub repositories or GitLab, whatever you use as well. Also, too, you have to look at a lot of tools. One thing that's going to come up is going to be working with, for example, a lot of SDLC and Devops processes in larger companies. And that's another discussion for another day, but there's a lot to learn. Now, as far as what are the top skills, Now, and this is true really for whether you become a developer or an architect. And I have some graphics coming up. I'm going to just talk about quickly. Let me just check the time just to make sure. Okay. I have a customer meeting right at 10. I don't want to miss. So as far as Linux, okay. So Lena is our resident Linux guru. You know, I know that, you know, from our discussions yesterday, she knows Red Hat. And again, you know, you're going to do well because the reality is with Linux, for example, you're going to be deploying blockchains on a Linux platform or a container platform in most cases. So having command line experience is going to be a big deal. Also, too, if you deploy blockchains in the cloud, like on AWS, you're going to be deploying them on an EC2 Linux instance. Same thing with an Ethereum node on IBM, not IBM, on AWS or Azure. So a lot of this is just knowing Linux is so important. Databases, the reality is if you know data structures, blockchain should be a natural because we're going to be looking at Merkle trees, for example. You're going to have to know as well how to recover data structures, how to maintain transaction logs as well. Now, for example, Hyperledger Fabric, you can use LevelDB or you could use CouchDB. Another thing, too, you'll have to get good at is running a lot of queries. A lot of companies are using blockchain to maintain archives, either for data intelligence now, or business intelligence is the term I should use, or for compliance requirements. So being able to put together a query using like JSON, for example, is really important. And to have the right database set up is so important as well. Because a lot of the blockchains like Corda and Hyperledger are private deployed blockchains. What does that mean? There is no visibility to the public unless if you authorize that. It's all private. You're going to have channels and different areas that you're going to have to learn and secure as well. Okay, programming, no question about it. Whether you're even an architect, you're going to need to know some kind of high-level program. That's going to, you know, could be Python, could be Java, could be Ruby. And you'll see the requirements are all over the map. Networking. Now, instead of client server, we're really focused mainly on peer-to-peer networking. Security, mainly it's going to be focused on cryptography, key management, like KMSs as well. Also, too, algorithms. So, for example, you're going to need to know like data structures. Another thing, too, is understand like consensus. How does the blockchain reach an agreement? How do you handle transparency and replication? Just a lot of things to consider, because the way you manage a database is going to be very different than how you manage blockchain. Now, in the true sense, a blockchain should be an immutable ledger, and it's decentralized and distributed. However, we know that in the world of private blockchains, this is sort of convoluted. So in Hyperledger Fabric, you can actually roll back, for example, a transaction if it's not valid. One of the things that you'll want to learn is understand like how Ethereum works versus like Hyperledger or Corda. And in Ethereum, we always validate transactions before they're ordered and placed in a block on the blockchain. In Hyperledger Fabric, it's actually the opposite. We actually will validate after we order, because it's a private blockchain. The assumption is that this is a trusted entity on the blockchain. However, if for some reason something comes up, we could always roll back. Smart contracts. So for those not familiar with smart contracts, this is basically a way that we're able to implement code that is going to be deployed on the blockchain. And typically, a smart contract is going to be immutable as well. In other words, once it's deployed on the blockchain, it's only really modifiable by the code itself. So that's another discussion in itself. But anyways, the goal is to execute after specific conditions. Smart contracts are basically binary. What does that mean? In other words, it's either 0 or a 1, and it's not in the middle, right? You meet the conditions of the smart contract or you don't. And again, that's more of a programming discussion on how all this works, but that's for another day. Okay, now the deployment stack. Now, this is an example of Ethereum. So typically, you're going to need to deal with the networking, which is the internet. That's peer-to-peer networking. We also have client hardware. So that's going to be basically everything from our network interface cards to our EVMs, our virtual machines as well. Now, we also have storage protocols, messaging protocols like Whisper. The EVM is a virtual machine. It's a Turing complete VM. And then as far as the application and a wallet, you're going to need to really get to learn wallets such as MetaMask as well. So DevOps, this is an area that is still up and coming. We're seeing more and more requirements for maintaining good code practices. Containers, you need to have container skills. Virtualization, you may need to deploy this on-prem or even in a cloud like Google or AWS or Azure. Also, too, blockchain as a service, APIs. So APIs are the on-ramp to the blockchain. This is how you get on the blockchain. I call it like the training wheels of the blockchain of the application, right? APIs are limited calls. So, for example, it's going to be pretty much puts and gets, lists, really limited to what you're going to be able to do, especially like in Ethereum. Now, deploying smart contracts, you will need to have high-level programming languages. Cryptocurrency, knowing about cryptos is going to be important. Now, it is important to distinguish that Ethereum uses a token called Ether. Polygon has Matic, on and on and on. But if you get into Hyperledger or Corda, there are no cryptocurrency or mining requirements or staking requirements for that matter. However, knowing about it could be very important. Also, public key encryption and hashing is important. So what are some of the development layers you want to look at? And these are all from different books that I've written and documented. So like the development layers could be using tools like Truffle. Ganache is a private blockchain, a local blockchain you can deploy. Drizzle, more of a framework. IDEs such as Remix. And then Hyperledger Fabric. Now, again, this is a whole different animal. It's just a different world compared to Ethereum. So we have a lot more parts and pieces to Hyperledger. If you ever want to get frustrated, become an Ethereum developer and then try to do Hyperledger. It's a great way to say, what am I doing, right? It's a different world, right? That's because it's permission. There's a lot more layers to work on. And also, too, it's modular. So with Ethereum, you only really have limited sets of APIs, development languages to work with, consensus, networking configs, right? In Hyperledger Fabric, you have different options plus different peers as well. And each peer here does its own little thing. Now, what about, for example, when it comes to Hyperledger development, We don't really use a wallet in Hyperledger, but it is important to realize that we do have accounts and channels and all that to learn. So it's a little bit different. So when we compare enterprise blockchains, it's important to know the use case between each of the major use cases. R3 Corda is strictly financial, mainly, or insurance is what we see quite a bit of use cases around. Quorum is really Ethereum, but it's meant to be permissioned. Quorum was actually developed by JP Morgan Chase at the time, but now is really released to the public. And then as far as like, what would be the language you might want to learn? Like Corda is, so for example, the platform, it's important as well to distinguish the back end from the front end. So for example, the platform development with Ethereum is Solidity, but you could develop, for example, with Solidity, Viper, Bamboo, Flint. These are just some of the smart contract languages. Hyperledger Fabric is mainly Golang in the back end, but you could develop JavaScript or Java with Golang. And also too, they do have a Python API as well. That was out there. I don't know if it's really development ready. I haven't checked in a while. Corda is mainly Kotlin, but you could develop smart contracts with Kotlin or Java. So my friend Peter has a head start, because here's the cool thing, Peter, about smart contracts and blockchain. In developing a Java program, JavaScript, Python, and you're not limited to the blockchain infrastructure, protocols, consensus, and all that. It's sort of like having a pool at the house that might be 20,000 gallons versus having a pool that is 50 gallons. So the reality is that if you're developing in Java right now, you know a lot more than what you're going to need to know with blockchain. That's the truth, because it's like having training wheels. You can only do so much based on the architecture of blockchain. It is what it is. Now, can you sort of expand on that? Sure. Here's where you can. You may want to, and actually, so there's been 2 or 3 people on Fiverr I've seen that have actually made a nice business model off of this. And that is really developing extensions or oracles, basically for blockchain services to connect to third-party sites. So you may want to get into writing JavaScript or something to connect to your enterprise blockchain to maybe, let's just say, a service such as a credit scoring system. Because here's the thing, the world of DeFi, decentralized finance, and fintech, they are really looking for people that can do tasks like that. It's just, again, there's just so many opportunities. It's just, I think it's hard to get out of the box of thinking, I'm just going to work for one employer and be happy. If you're able to get outside of that comfort level, your opportunities are going to scale up quite a bit, I think. So just a thought, some things to think about, right? Quorum is actually the same as Ethereum. It's really more of a private deployment. Ripple uses Python, and then at the time of writing, Python, for example, Ripple does not support smart contracts, but however, that is actually something I need to update. That was like about 2 years ago. Now it does, but there's actually extensions that you can to actually deploy smart contracts. So that is something I need to update per se, but you can actually develop smart contracts now with Ripple. But that's mainly, again, mainly Python, and I think it's JavaScript or Java. I need to check. I don't remember top of my head what's supported. So again, just so many opportunities. Okay, and then one thing to be aware is we're moving from client server so basically, like if you're developing applications now, it's client server based most of the time. So web, for example, when it comes to Web 3.0 and decentralization, that's really, developing instead of client server, it's more peer-to-peer. So it's a different attitude you have to start thinking of. So for example, we're just moving layers around is what we're doing. So what is the salary range? So a blockchain architect can, average about 149,000 a year. Now, every site is going to have totally different salaries. So don't expect this here or that there. One thing I noticed is that there's several blockchain hubs. Now, depending on if you're in Toronto, if you're in London, if you're in New York, if you're in Jacksonville, Florida, just kidding. Jacksonville, Florida actually is a fintech hub. And actually people don't realize that from a population perspective per capita, we have like the most fintech companies here. And also too, the first Bitcoin transaction actually happened in Jacksonville, Florida at Papa John's. So there's actually a couple articles on it where the first live transaction on the Bitcoin blockchain in 2009 was actually from one of the Bitcoin developers to a developer in Jacksonville, Florida at the time at UNF. They actually got 10,000 Bitcoin for like 3 pizzas. So what a deal. Imagine if they had held on to Bitcoin that long, right? So interesting story around Bitcoin at the time. Okay, so ZipRecruiter has like a lot of roles between 100,000 and 200,000. Glassdoor has average about 127,000. So just be aware that that's sort of the range. Again, that's for an architect. Now, the reality is that the salaries for developers are generally a lot higher. And let me check the messages here. Okay, R3 Corda. Yeah, so Corda is by far probably the best blockchain company out there when it comes to community events, no question about it. Hyperledger does a lot of online stuff, but Corda has done a lot of free certification events. Matter of fact, I got my Corda developer cert by attending one of their blockchain events. So saved $100 or $200 or whatever. So yeah, thanks for sharing that, Peter, as well. And congratulations on that. Okay. Okay, thanks for sharing, Andrew. Okay. And let's see, how are we doing on time? I've got 10 minutes. Okay. So as far as LinkedIn, and again, this is something I would typically go through in a longer class, but I did want to take a few minutes. And I would also go through demos on deploying Ethereum and Hyperledger and actually getting the blockchain up and running. Now, I do have actually several videos on YouTube. I'll share the link with you as well if that's of interest. Okay, so how do you get into becoming a blockchain architect or developer? You could take a boot camp, right? $6,000, $10,000 may be the right option. You could always buy now, pay later. You could also take learning courses just by different e-learning platforms. There's great courses on O'Reilly, for example. I was teaching at the time on O'Reilly. LinkedIn Learning has a lot of courses now. Our site as well has a ton of courses. I also develop courses for a company called 101blockchains.com. You'll find my certification courses on NFTs, metaverse, the enterprise blockchain architect on 101 blockchains as well. So how do you become a developer? I always tell people, be reasonable in your expectations. If you're in IT now, you should have an easier time than someone not in IT. Expect between 5 and 8 months of training and learning. You're going to want to spend a few $100s on certifications as well. I have a link list I'm going to add to the Dropbox folder. Give me about an hour or so to finish that after my customer call. I'll make sure you have that. And I will place a couple ebooks I've written in there for you as well. One of the things that you can also look at is get a coach. You know, they can help you. One of the things that I do as well on Fiverr and also on my platform is I do coach people in that area in blockchain and cloud. Set your goals as well. So just be aware to be reasonable. Some of the certifications, why get certifications? Straightforward. If you want to become an architect, these are the top ones I'd recommend. The CBSA, I have a course on that and a book as well on Amazon on that. The SEBA from 101 Blockchains. Also for developers, the Corda developer that Peter had mentioned is there. And I think Peter also is also good point, Peter. I realized too that I think they have a new certification out as well. I just haven't been able to keep up with it. And again, Blockchain Training Alliance has excellent certifications on the Hyperledger and Ethereum as well. So keep that in mind. Now, different training options are out there as well. Coaching will cost you $100 to $200 an hour, you know, depending on the coach and what you're looking for. If you want to become an architect, you're going to need to do whiteboarding and sales solutions. If you're going to become a developer, it's really about designing applications that can connect and provide value. Interview techniques. Now, in the course, again, this is a course that's going to be released about next week. So just be aware that if you want to get a deep dive into this, it will be available on our site. Interview techniques, know your market. And these are things we'll cover in more detail. Also, too, if anyone here is a military veteran, I recommend you go to LinkedIn and sign up for the veteran program. You'll get a free year of premium. That includes LinkedIn Learning and sort of like the top rank in resume search as well. And then some interview questions for you as well. In the coaching, we go through problems and solutions quite a bit and in the course. And then some resources. Again, the meetup groups are awesome. A lot of good ones out there, including mine. And I do have some interesting speakers. I'm hoping to have Hedera get on and also Corda. And then I avoid cryptocurrencies right now because everybody does that. So we're trying to focus on enterprise really. Some of the books that I have out there are listed here. I have a DeFi as well and a FinTech one that I'm finishing up. Some of the courses on our platform are listed here on just blockchain and then coaching as well. So thanks for joining. Then if you want to get a hold of me, here is the information. Now, I wanted to take a minute to talk about a few links. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out to me directly and connect on LinkedIn as well. And let me go ahead and get up the LinkedIn here. I just had it up. Oh, before I forget, that is my book on Amazon as well. You're welcome to view that on Kindle if you have it as well. Then I thought I had LinkedIn up, but I think I killed it by accident. No, I do have it up. I just had it right here. Okay, well, I get search right here. So for those that aren't familiar with LinkedIn, go over to jobs. But one of the things I want to point out is look for a blockchain developer and consultant or engineers. A lot of roles are really good right now. Some of them even put salaries in there. For example, I saw one with, I think it was like some of these were think it was Consensus had a really good one. Oh, I'm a top applicant. That's great. Like this one here, Node.js, GitHub, right? If you're already developing Java, working with Linux, these are things that you probably already know. Again, just a lot of things out there to find. Consensus had a cool one that I liked. I don't know where it is now, but it was like a developer advocate, sort of a cool one. You'd work with the developers. Let me see, company. Must have disappeared. Oh, there it is. Yeah, so this one here looks sort of cool. This one here has 9 applicants. This is for their Snap platform. This is basically working with developers, promoting blockchain, just basic proficiency around SDKs, RPCs, GitHub, using explorers, and Consensus pays pretty well. I know a few people over there. This is probably a $200K a year job, working remotely, and maybe some travel. This is an evangelist role. This is a blockchain engineer, Ganesh. So they maintain a lot of the Ethereum alliance programs. And again, very straightforward. And if you know Node.js, Solidity, these are great roles to consider. All right, so I have a few minutes for questions. Is there any questions? And again, one thing, be aware, check the Dropbox link I put in the chat earlier. And I will upload the documents after my call, and you can grab them. Is there anything I can help with? Any questions? Yes, so the Dropbox link is in the chat, but let me repost it. Let me go grab it from there. And you can always contact me on LinkedIn. And here is the link again for that. Again, I'm going to upload the presentation. The recording will be there. And yeah, so you can just find me right on LinkedIn. I'll put my direct link here as well. And again, thanks again for joining. I wish I had more time today, but customer calls have to take over right now. Those bills don't get paid by themselves, as they say. So I hope this provided some great insight. Again, this is going to be in about a 2.5-hour course. You can find it on Tech Commanders and a couple other sites. It won't be on Udemy just because I'm not really a big Udemy fan. So sorry, I know people love Udemy, but as an instructor, Udemy really doesn't pay unless if you get 100,000 of views. It doesn't make sense. But anyways, as far as techcommanders.com, be aware you can go to our site. We do have free courses. I do have introductory blockchain courses as well, some of which are for free, and cloud courses as well. So with that said, I hope to see everybody again in a future meetup. We do have some exciting meetups coming in both the Google Cloud group and the blockchain group as well. So I hope to see everybody here again in the near future. Have a great day.